8,848 meters above sea level, Everest, Chomolungma, Sagarmatha. This mountain has many names, but only one essence. It pulls people in like a magnet. For many, it is the dream of a lifetime. Years of training, months of preparation, enormous sums of money. Some sell their homes, take out loans, sacrifice everything for a single chance. A chance to stand on the roof of the world. But Everest is not just a mountain, it is a graveyard. Over the past 100 years, more than 300 people have died on its slopes. Their bodies still lie frozen in the ice and snow, locked forever in a place where no human truly belongs. Most never came back down. They became part of the very peak they longed to conquer. Death comes here in many forms. Avalanches wipe out entire expeditions. Altitude sickness shuts down the mind. Oxygen starvation stops the heart. Hurricane winds sweep climbers into the abyss. And sometimes, exhausted, they simply sit down to rest and never stand up again. Every body on Everest is an unfinished dream, someone's son or daughter, someone's husband or wife. They came here alive, filled with hope, and they remain here forever, a silent entry in the grim statistics of the world's most dangerous mountain. But among all these tragedies, one story stands apart, the story of the man known as the Red Scarf. For more than 30 years, his body served as a landmark for those on their way to the top. For 30 years, he silently greeted every climber who passed. And then, he was gone, without a trace, as if he had never been there at all. Who was he? How did he end up on Everest? And most of all, who decided to remove his body, and why? The story of the Red Scarf is more than just another climbing tragedy. It is a mystery that still haunts everyone who hears about it. To understand what happened to the Red Scarf, we have to go back to the year 1986. That was when climbers first spotted the body wearing a red scarf on the northeast ridge of Everest. The altitude was 8,500 meters, almost at the summit. The man lay in a small hollow between the rocks, as if he had sat down to rest and simply fallen asleep. Forever. His face was calm, his posture natural. If not for the bright red scarf around his neck, he might have gone unnoticed. But the scarf stood out, like a beacon against the gray rocks and white snow. The first climbers who saw him remembered instantly. The man in the red scarf, somewhere between Camp 7 and Camp 8, just off the main route. Years passed. Every season, dozens of expeditions took the northern route, and every one of them saw him, the unknown climber in the red scarf. He became part of Everest's landscape, part of the mountain itself. Climbers even took photos beside him, not out of cynicism, but out of respect. On Everest, the dead are honored differently. Here, everyone is a brother in misfortune. Today you pass by a frozen companion. Tomorrow, someone else might pass by you. The Red Scarf became a legend. Experienced climbers told his story to newcomers. His name came up around campfires at base camp. Who was he? Where did he come from? Which expedition had he joined? No one knew the answers. And yet, there was something strange. For 10 years, his body hardly changed. On Everest, the mountain preserves its dead. The temperature never rises above freezing. Bodies turn to natural mummies and remain intact for decades. The Red Scarf stayed exactly as he had looked when they first found him back in the 80s. Some climbers began to see him as a guardian of the mountain. They left prayer flags beside him, whispered words of thanks for a safe climb. The dead man in the red scarf became a living part of Everest. May 29, 1995. A British expedition was making its way up the familiar route. The guide led the group toward a well-known landmark, the Red Scarf. They passed Camp 7, turned right, headed for the familiar hollow between the rocks. But there was no one there. The niche was empty. Just a few stones. A faint impression in the snow where a body once lay. The Red Scarf was gone, vanished, as if the mountain air had swallowed him whole. So, who was he? The man who served as a landmark on Everest for 30 years and then mysteriously disappeared. For a long time, his identity remained unknown, until climbers' archives and eyewitness accounts began to piece his story together. His name was David Lama González, a Mexican, 28 years old, an electrical engineer from the city of Guadalajara, an ordinary young man from a middle-class family. He worked at a factory, lived with his parents, saved money to marry his fiancée, Maria. He dreamed of children, a mortgage, a quiet family life. So, What did Everest have to do with him? Mexico has no mountaineering tradition, no 8,000-meter peaks, no climbing schools. Most Mexicans had only ever seen snow on television. But David had a secret. Since childhood, he had been captivated by mountains. Not the rolling hills around Guadalajara, but real mountains. Sharp peaks, glaciers, walls that looked impossible to climb. He bought mountaineering magazines, studied routes, dreamed of great ascents. His friends laughed. What kind of mountaineer could a Mexican ever be? But David was serious. At 22, he climbed Orizaba, the highest volcano in Mexico. 5,500 meters, an impressive achievement for a beginner. Then came Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl, every major peak in his country. But it wasn't enough. David wanted more. He studied ice climbing techniques, learned how to handle high altitude. He saved every peso for equipment. Imagine it, a young man from tropical Mexico preparing himself for icy giants. His first serious expedition took him to the Andes. Aconcagua in Argentina, nearly 7,000 meters, the tallest peak in the Americas. David climbed it alone, without guides or porters. The local gauchos shook their heads and called him Loco Mexicano, the crazy Mexican. But he reached the summit. When he returned home, he was celebrated as a hero. Photos of him holding the Mexican flag on top of Aconcagua appeared in local newspapers, and in that moment, David knew this was his path. He was born for the mountains. The next goal was the 8,000ers, the Himalayas, Everest, but here the problems began. An expedition to Everest cost as much as a fine house, $50,000 just for the permit and basic logistics. David didn't have that kind of money, and there was no way to get it. He wrote letters to climbing clubs, searched for sponsors, entered competitions. Rejection after rejection. No one believed in a Mexican engineer with no connections and little international experience. Everest, they said, was a game for the rich and the professionals. Years passed. David refused to give up. He worked overtime, skipped vacations, saved on everything. Maria, his fiancée, grew angry. He was pouring all their money into this wild dream instead of preparing for their wedding. His parents worried. Their son had lost himself to the mountains. And then, a miracle. 1985, an American private mountaineering club was recruiting participants. The group would include climbers from the United States, Britain, and Mexico. David applied, and he was accepted. Finally, the chance he had dreamed of for 8 years. In the spring of '85, he would fly to Nepal to attempt the roof of the world. But getting into the expedition was only half the battle. The hardest part came next. The climbing club could organize the trip, but it couldn't pay for it. Each participant had to cover their own costs, $25,000 per person. For an engineer from Guadalajara, it was an impossible figure. His yearly salary was just $3,000. That meant saving the equivalent of 8 years of wages in only a few months. Impossible? Not for a man who dreamed of Everest. David started with the banks. He applied for loans. One rejection, then another, then 10 more. The bankers looked at him like he was insane. $25,000 for what? To climb a mountain? Seriously? And how would he pay it back? What if something happened to him in the Himalayas? So, he turned to his relatives. An uncle gave him $2,000. A cousin added $1,500. Neighbors pitched in $50 here, $100 there. Slowly, the amount grew. Every single dollar counted. Maria gave him an ultimatum. The wedding, or this reckless expedition. David chose the expedition. She left him. She even returned the engagement ring, the one he had bought on installment, and sent him the cash through mutual friends. "Spend it on your mountains," was the unspoken message. David sold his car, old but still running, $3,000. He sold his brother's motorcycle, another $1,500. Then he emptied the house of anything valuable, the TV, the stereo, his record collection. His parents were shocked. Their son was literally selling off their life. He picked up a second job, hauling boxes at a warehouse. After 8 hours at the factory, he worked until midnight, lifting crates. He slept 4 hours a night. He lost 10 kilos. His friends barely recognized him in the street. He borrowed from everyone he knew, co-workers, old classmates, neighbors in the building. He wrote IOUs, promised to pay back with interest after the expedition. People gave him money, some out of pity, others just curious to see if he'd really go through with it. Was he truly going to Everest? By February of '85, he had almost the full amount. Almost, but not quite. He was still short by $3,000. Desperation set in. 1 month left before his flight to Nepal. Where could he possibly find the final sum? He made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his days. The house on Morelos Street, where he grew up, where his parents had lived for 30 years, the family's only property, their shield against poverty. Banco Nacional, the last bank on his list. Alone against the house. Manager Jorge Vasquez listened to his story with a skeptical look. You understand the risk? If you can't make the payments, the house will be seized. Your parents will be out on the street. The interest rate, 12% a year. The monthly payment, $700, more than David's salary. That evening, a family council. David explained the situation. His mother, Consuelo, went pale. You want to mortgage our home? And if something happens to you on that mountain, we'll be left on the street? Nothing will happen. I'll come back a hero. I'll pay the debt and buy a new house. His brother's wife shook her head. David, this is madness. You're gambling the roof over your parents' heads. The discussion dragged on until midnight. His mother wept. His father chain-smoked. The family was divided, David against everyone else. Fine, his father said at last. If this matters that much, I'll sign. But remember, the fate of this family is on your conscience. On Monday, Rafael González signed the papers with a trembling hand. An hour later, $3,000 appeared in David's account. The goal was reached, but the family no longer spoke to him. They looked at him as if he were a stranger. Their son had turned into a man willing to put his parents out on the street for the sake of ambition. This was the price of a dream, a broken engagement, a house stripped of valuables, debts in the tens of thousands. His parents' home mortgaged away, a family staring at him with pain and disbelief. Can you imagine? A man wagering his entire life for a few hours on the roof of the world. Was it worth it? That question would haunt everyone who knew David Lama, especially after what happened on Everest. March 1985. The plane touched down at Tribhuvan Airport. A group of men in bright jackets walked down the stairs, 8 climbers who hoped to return home as heroes. David Lama was the last to step off. A huge pack on his shoulders, a mix of awe and nerves written across his face. He looked around, soaking in every detail. The air in Kathmandu smelled of spices, wood smoke, and something faintly mountain-like. In the distance beyond the sprawl of the city, the outline of the Himalayas rose against the sky. We're here, he whispered to himself. We're really here. Kathmandu Airport in the 80s was pure chaos. Porters grabbed at bags, taxi drivers shouted over one another, vendors tried to sell trinkets. The Mexicans and Americans clustered together, wide-eyed and lost. None of them had ever set foot in Asia. The expedition leader, Carlos Mendez, tried to spot their contacts. According to the plan, members of the Nepal Mountaineering Club were supposed to meet them. But finding one face in that crowd was like searching for a shadow. "Señor Mendez," came a voice behind him. He turned to see a short Nepali man in a worn jacket, smiling warmly. He introduced himself, Pemba Sherpa, their local coordinator. He would handle the permits, transport, and supplies. The journey to base camp took 4 days, first by bus to Lukla, then on foot along mountain trails. The Mexicans struggled with the altitude, moving slowly through the thin air. Each kilometer felt heavier than the last. David never complained. Each step carried him closer to his dream. He photographed everything: Sherpa villages, suspension bridges, snowy peaks. Back home in Guadalajara, no one would believe such beauty even existed. On the 3rd day, they crossed paths with an American team coming down, sunburned, confident climbers in shiny new gear. Their leader introduced himself, Tom Johnson, a guide with 20 years of experience. "You're Mexican?" he asked, raising his brows when he heard their plan. "Never seen Mexicans on Everest before. Good luck, boys. See you at the top." The Mexicans exchanged glances. Johnson's tone carried a trace of condescension. What were these tropical newcomers doing in the Himalayas? Carlos clenched his jaw. They would show everyone what they were capable of. Base camp greeted them with a scatter of gray tents pitched on a barren plateau. The altitude was 5,200 meters. The air was thin, their heads light. But David was ecstatic. Everest loomed close now, a massive black and white pyramid filling the horizon. And that was when the first problems began. The Mexicans pitched their tents a little apart from the others. As they unpacked, the truth hit them. Their gear was worn out, tents patched and fraying, sleeping bags from another decade, stoves that only worked half the time. Carlos Mendez glanced at the neighboring camp, the Americans. They had brand new North Face tents, gleaming oxygen bottles with modern regulators, satellite radios, a weather station, even a portable shower. The Americans had a whole team of Sherpas, hauling loads, cooking meals, maintaining the gear. "How much do you think they paid for their expedition?" David asked quietly. "Probably 100,000 each," Carlos replied. "Maybe more." The Mexicans had scraped together 25,000 apiece, 1/4 of the budget, and the difference showed in every detail, in the quality of the equipment, the number of Sherpas, the level of comfort. But David didn't let it discourage him. If anything, it fueled him. So, what if they didn't have the money of the rich? They had something else, a dream, determination, and the will to prove that Mexicans too could conquer mountains. He rose at 5 in the morning when the camp was still asleep. Stepping out of his tent, he stared at Everest. The summit glowed pink in the rising sun, a beauty so unreal it stole the breath away. "I'll reach you," he whispered to the mountain, "no matter what it costs." Acclimatization began on the very first day. The plan was simple: climb gradually, let their bodies adapt to the thin air. First camp at 5,400 meters, the second at 5,700, the third at 6,000. Already on that first climb, the group realized they had entered another world. Breathing was a constant battle. After only 5 minutes of walking, they had to stop, gasping at the thin air. Their hearts pounded like hammers. 2 team members showed classic signs of altitude sickness: pounding headaches, nausea, dizziness. Their bodies rebelled against the conditions. Blood pressure spiked, pulses raced, sleep turned shallow and restless. Carlos made a hard call. He sent the 2 back down to base camp, giving them a week to recover. If the symptoms didn't ease, they would go home. On Everest, there was no room for weakness. That left 6. They pushed on with the acclimatization climbs, but the problems didn't stop. At 6,000 meters, Ricardo Torres, one of their strongest climbers, broke down. "I can't," he gasped to Carlos, struggling for breath between every word. "My legs won't move. My vision's going black." Altitude sickness strikes differently every time. For some, it's headaches; for others, fluid in the lungs; for some, the body simply shuts down. There's no way to predict it. Even the best prepared climbers sometimes can't handle the height. Ricardo turned back. Soon after, Jose Martinez followed. He had pushed higher, reaching 6,500 meters, but the next morning, he woke with swelling in his face and struggled to breathe. Cerebral edema, a death sentence if ignored. There was no time to hesitate. The team was shrinking before their eyes. From 8 men, only 4 remained: Carlos Mendez, David Lama, the American John Green, and the British guide Harry Jones. An international crew bound together by a single goal. David handled the acclimatization better than the others. Years of training on Mexico's volcanoes were paying off. It was hard, yes. His head throbbed, his lungs burned, but he pressed on without complaint. "The kid's got iron will," Harry Jones remarked. "Quiet, modest, but stubborn as a mule. He'll make it to the end." Every climb was a trial. 30 kilos on his back, steep slopes, too little air to fill his lungs. Step by step, meter by meter, every 50 meters they stopped to breathe, sip water, gather strength. At 6,800, the team spent their final night of acclimatization. Tomorrow, they would descend to base camp, rest, and prepare for the summit push. David lay awake, staring out of the tent window at the stars. Up here, they seemed closer, sharper, brighter. Tomorrow, the real climb begins, he thought. Everything before this was just training. On May 6th, the meteorologists gave their forecast. Perfect conditions ahead. Clear skies, light winds, good visibility. Such windows were rare on Everest. Carlos didn't hesitate. The summit push would begin. May 7th, 4 in the morning. The team woke in complete darkness. Breakfast was silent. Oatmeal, tea, energy bars. No one spoke of fear or risk. Everyone knew what was at stake. David checked his gear one last time. Oxygen bottles, regulator, mask, ice axe, crampons, harness, headlamp, spare batteries, first aid kit. and in his jacket pocket, the red scarf, a gift from his mother for luck. "Ready?" Carlos asked. 4 nods in reply. They stepped out into the pre-dawn blackness, headlamps switched on, 4 beams of light in the endless dark. Ahead of them lay 8 hours of climbing to the roof of the world. The weather is flawless, not a cloud in the sky, stars glittering like gemstones. Almost no wind, a rare blessing on Everest. The temperature is -30, but in full summit gear, it's bearable. They start slowly, every step measured, every movement efficient. At this height, you can't waste energy. They breathe through oxygen masks. Every inhale is precious. They greet the dawn at 7,000 meters. The sun rises over the horizon and paints the snow a soft pink. The Himalayas stretch to the edge of sight, endless ridges, peaks, glaciers. "Beautiful," David whispers into his mask. At Camp 7, they take a final break. Altitude, 7,900 meters. 1,000 vertical meters remain, the hardest of their lives. The death zone begins at 8,000. They sip hot tea from thermoses and check their oxygen systems. 2 bottles each, 1 in use, 1 in reserve. It should be enough for the ascent and the descent. It should be, but nothing is guaranteed. "Last push, boys," Carlos says. "We'll be on the roof of the world soon." May 8th, 6 in the morning. The last camp at 7,900. David wakes to his alarm, though he barely slept. He tossed in his sleeping bag all night, thinking about the day ahead. Today is summit or death. There is no third option. He forces down breakfast. The oatmeal tastes like cardboard, the tea like water. His stomach is tight with nerves. His hands tremble slightly, not from cold, but from anticipation. 8 years of preparation come down to the next 8 hours. Carlos checks the gear one final time. Oxygen bottles full, regulators working, 2 bottles per climber. The absolute limit. No one can carry more up here. "Remember the rule," he tells the team. "If anything goes wrong, we turn back. No summit is worth a life." At 7 in the morning, they leave camp. 4 figures in bright jackets move slowly up the snow slope. Every step costs dearly. The air is almost non-existent. 5 breaths for every single step. The first major obstacle is the Khumbu icefall. Enormous blocks of ice ready to collapse without warning. Crevasses plunging hundreds of meters. Aluminum ladders thrown across gaping voids. David goes second on the rope, right behind Carlos. Eyes on his feet, not on the depth yawning beneath the ladders. Step by step, rung by rung, absolute focus, one wrong move, and it's over. Beyond the icefall begins the Hillary Ridge, sharp as a razor's edge. To the right, a sheer drop into Tibet. To the left, a plunge into Nepal. The wind here can be deadly, tossing climbers into either abyss. But today there is calm, an almost impossible stroke of luck. At 8,200 meters, they stop for a brief rest. Oxygen bottles are nearly empty and must be swapped out. They drink water, squeeze down energy gels. Every calorie counts. "How are you doing?" Carlos asks. "I'm fine," David replies, though his legs throb with exhaustion. John Green looks the worst of all. The American gasps for breath even through his mask. Harry Jones shakes his head. The man is at his limit. Any further, and they may have to send him back down. But John pushes on. 8,400, 8,600. Every 200 meters feels like a small victory. The summit is now less than 300 meters away, but they are the hardest 300 meters on Earth. The final stretch is nearly vertical. David claws at the snow, drives his ice axe into the hard crust. His lungs burn with every breathless gasp. His heart hammers so loudly he can hear it through the storm mask. At 12:30, the slope eases. Ahead lies a small snow plateau. In the middle stand colorful flags fluttering in the wind. The summit, the roof of the world, 8,848 meters above sea level. David takes the last few steps and drops to his knees. Not from exhaustion, but from sheer emotion. He is here. He is truly here. Higher than anyone or anything on Earth. "We did it!" Carlos shouts, tearing off his mask. David pulls a Mexican flag from his pack. Red, white, and green ripples in the thin wind. He plants it into the snow beside the others. American, Japanese, Nepali. Mexico is now here too. Tears freeze on his cheeks in the cold. He hugs his teammates, laughing and crying all at once. All the sacrifices, the debts, the broken relationships. In this moment, it all feels like a fair price. Carlos lifts the radio, tuning to base camp's frequency. Base, this is the summit team. We're at the top. I repeat, we're on the summit of Everest. The radio explodes with cheers. Down below, the support crew celebrates. Pemba Sherpa dances around the set. The Mexicans have done the impossible. They have conquered the highest peak on Earth. They take photos to remember the moment. David grins from ear to ear. A group shot, 4 climbers triumphant on the roof of the world. A selfie with the Himalayas stretching endlessly behind them. This is the best day of my life. I want to thank everyone who believed in us. But the euphoria doesn't last. Harry Jones checks his watch, 1:30. They've already been on the summit for 10 minutes. Time to move. Guys, we need to go, the British guide says. The oxygen's running low, and we've got 8 hours of descent ahead. The golden rule of Everest, the summit is only halfway. Most tragedies happen on the way down, when climbers relax too soon. At 3 in the afternoon, they leave the top. One last look at the flags, one last photo. David touches the red scarf in his pocket. His mother's gift has brought him luck. They descend at a steady pace. The weather holds, visibility is clear. A few more hours and they'll be safe at Camp 7. Then home, to glory, to recognition. But Everest rarely lets its guests leave without a test. The first signs come at 4 o'clock. Thin cirrus clouds drift in from the west. The wind picks up, just slightly, but enough for the veterans to notice. I don't like this, Harry Jones mutters, glancing at the horizon. Carlos is uneasy too. The forecast had promised calm until evening, but mountains follow their own rules. Meteorologists often get it wrong up here. Pick up the pace, he orders. We need to reach Camp 7 while we can still see the route. They push harder, as much as anyone can at 8,000 meters. Oxygen in the bottles is running low. David switches to minimum flow, 1 liter a minute, saving every breath. By 4:30, the snow begins. At first just a few flakes, barely noticeable. Then thicker, heavier. Visibility drops from 1 kilometer to 500 meters. Then 200. Carlos, maybe we should stop, John Green shouts over the rising wind. Find shelter and wait it out? But stopping means freezing to death. At 8,000 meters, there are no real shelters. Only down, only movement. Stopping is dying. By 5 o'clock, the snowfall has turned into a full-blown hurricane. The wind roars like a jet engine. Snow lashes their faces so hard, it stings even through goggles. The temperature plunges, -45 and falling. Visibility shrinks to nothing, literally. Beyond an outstretched arm, there is only white, a blizzard swallowing the world. Even the bright jackets of their teammates vanish into the haze a few meters away. Carlos leads, probing the way with his ice axe. David should be right behind him. They're tied together. Then Harry, then John. 4 people linked by a single rope in a whiteout. But in a storm like this, rope is a fragile bond. The wind flings the climbers from side to side. Snow clogs goggles, masks, gear. Every step is a lottery. At 5:30, Carlos stops to catch his breath. He turns and sees no one. The rope dangles loose, snapped. Where is the team? David, he shouts into the hurricane. Harry, John! His voice is swallowed by the wind. Echo bounces off the rocks, lost in the white void. No one. He is alone. What happened? Did someone slip, yanking the rope until it broke? Did they simply veer off and lose each other in the snow? On Everest, it happens all the time. People vanish 10 meters away. Carlos searches for tracks, but snow buries everything instantly. The wind erases prints faster than they're made. Within minutes, nothing remains. He pulls out the radio, switches to the emergency channel. This is Carlos. Does anyone hear me? Static. The hurricane makes such interference that the radio cuts in and out. Maybe the others' batteries are dead. Maybe their radios broke. There are too many possibilities. 200 meters east, David realizes he's lost when the shape of Carlos ahead disappears. He tries to catch up, but only gets more lost, wandering through a maze of rocks and overhanging snow. His oxygen is nearly gone. The regulator needle in the red. Maybe 30 minutes left. He needs to find shelter to ride out the storm. Otherwise, he'll die from lack of oxygen. He finds a small hollow between the rocks. Not perfect, but better than the open slope. He crawls inside like an animal into its den. Switches off his oxygen to stretch what's left. The most terrifying night of his life begins. Harry Jones and John Green vanish into the storm around the same time. Each goes his own way, each hoping to find the others. But in a blizzard like this, it's impossible. You could pass within a meter of someone and never see them. The hurricane rages until morning, 9 hours of white hell at 8,000 meters. Of the 4 who stood on the summit that morning, only Carlos Mendez makes it back to Camp 7. He collapses inside his tent, exhausted, frostbitten, in shock. 3 teammates lost somewhere in the white void. Are they alive? Where could they be? And more importantly, how can anyone search in this chaos? The storm breaks only at dawn, but Everest has already claimed its toll. Carlos stumbles out of the tent and switches on his radio. He calls for them one by one. David, do you read me? John, where are you? Harry, can you hear me? Nothing but silence. Then, at 1:30 in the night, the radio crackles to life. A weak, broken signal. Carlos, this is David. Do you hear me? The voice is barely there through the static. Carlos grabs the mic, shouting into it. David, where are you? Are you okay? Can you make it to camp? I don't know where I am. So cold. I can't feel my hands. The exhaustion in David's voice is unmistakable. The deadly fatigue of a man who has fought the mountain for 12 hours and is losing. Carlos tries to pin down his location. He fires questions. Can you see the camp? Are there rocks nearby? Can you move? David's answers are scattered, somewhere on the northeast ridge, lost in the storm, oxygen running out. Listen to me carefully, Carlos says. You have to move down. Any slope, it doesn't matter. Just down. Find shelter from the wind. Save your oxygen. Understood. I'll try. The signal steadies. David explains. He has found a small hollow between the rocks, shielded from the wind. He plans to wait there until morning. His oxygen will last maybe 2 hours, no more. Imagine it. A man sitting in a stone niche at 8,500 meters. The death zone. Minus 40 degrees. Oxygen almost gone. And below, his teammate listens to his voice, knowing there is no way to help. Carlos, tell my parents. I love them very much. Don't talk like that. We'll find you in the morning. We'll go down together. No, I feel it. This is the end. I'm so tired. I just want to sleep. Every climber knows when someone in the death zone longs to sleep, it's a terrible sign. The body is shutting down, the brain rationing its last strength. Sleep up here means death. David, don't sleep. Do you hear me? Don't you dare fall asleep. But the voice grows weaker. David speaks slowly, with long pauses. He talks about his home in Guadalajara, about his mother who cooked tamales on Sundays, about Maria, the girl he never had the chance to marry. Carlos, no regrets. I was on the summit. I saw the whole world. David, hold on. Dawn is 3 hours away. We'll come for you. Beautiful scarf. My mother's beautiful scarf. She gave it to me for luck. His voice turns incoherent. Altitude sickness and frostbite are taking their toll. The brain is shutting down piece by piece. At base camp, the support team is awake. 8 people sit around the radio, listening to their teammates slip away. No one cries. They're too stunned. Just hours ago, David stood on top of the world, and now he is saying goodbye. Carlos, are you there? I'm here. I hear you. Thank you for everything. Tell them Mexicans can dream too. The final words barely reach through the static. Then silence. Carlos calls for David an hour, 2, 3. He turns every frequency, boosts the signal. Nothing. The line has gone silent forever. May 10th, 2 days after that final radio call, a Japanese expedition climbs the northeast ridge. 6 experienced mountaineers led by Yasuo Kato, following the classic route to the summit. Around midday, the group stops for a break at 8,400 meters. They rest, drink water, check their gear. Then one of the climbers notices something strange among the rocks to the right of the route. Kato-san, look over there. Is that a person? The leader raises his binoculars. Yes. In a small hollow between the stones sits a climber, motionless, dressed in a bright red jacket, a red scarf at his neck. At first glance, he looks dead, but as they approach, the impossible happens. The man stirs. He lifts his head and looks at them. His lips try to form words, but no sound comes. Blue with cold, his face crusted with frost, yet still alive. Kato realizes instantly, this is the missing Mexican. The tragedy of his expedition is known to every camp on the mountain. 2 days ago, 4 climbers vanished in the storm. Everyone believed they were gone, and yet here he is, David Lama González, alive but barely breathing. He has spent 2 days in the death zone with no food, almost no water, and no oxygen. How he has survived at all is a mystery. "Help!" David whispers in English. "So cold. I can't stand." The Japanese climbers exchange uneasy glances. He must be rescued, immediately. Every minute counts. But how? David is 50 meters off the main route. Reaching him means losing precious time and energy. Worse, he cannot move on his own. His legs are frozen, his strength gone. He would have to be carried or dragged by rope. 6 men hauling one half-dead climber 4 vertical kilometers down the deadliest sections of Everest. Cato checks his watch. 6 hours until nightfall. If they turn back now, they could get the Mexican down to safer altitude before dark. But that would mean abandoning their summit bid. A year of preparation, enormous expense, the dream of an entire team, gone in an instant. And if they continue toward the summit, David will remain here forever, in this hollow of stone, alone, while his family waits for him back home. Can you imagine that dilemma? "Kato-san, what do we do?" one of the climbers asks. The leader stays silent. The hardest decision of his life. Save a stranger or chase their own goal? In mountaineering, there's an unwritten rule. Everyone is responsible for themselves. But there's another. Climbers should help one another. David looks at the Japanese team with pleading eyes. He understands their dilemma. He knows he is asking them to give up their dream for his life. But what else can he do? Cato stands frozen for 15 minutes. His team shifts impatiently around him. Time is running out. The weather window could close. Every hour of delay lowers their chances. Ahead still lies 6 hours of climbing to the summit. But the Mexicans' eyes? There is no blame in them, no demands. Only quiet hope. David understands the situation as well as they do. He knows what he is asking. "Kato-san, what do we do?" another climber presses. "If we wait another hour, we won't reach the top before dark." The leader looks at David, then at his team, then at the summit. 3 years of preparation, hundreds of thousands of dollars, the dream of the whole group, and all of it weighed against the life of one man. He steps toward the Mexican, crouches beside him, sets down his pack. From it, he pulls a large thermos, the one meant to warm them on the summit. He unscrews the cap and pours steaming tea into a metal cup. "Drink," he says in English. David takes the cup with trembling hands. His fingers barely respond. Second-degree frostbite. Still, he grips the hot metal tightly and raises it to his lips. The first sip nearly makes him cry with relief. The burning liquid sears his throat, then spreads warmth through his body. His first real hot food in 2 days. His stomach growls with hunger, but more than that, there is heat. Life-saving heat. "Slowly," Cato warns. "Don't rush." David nods, takes another sip, then another. Gradually, clarity begins to return. 2 days in the death zone had turned his brain to fog, but the hot tea pulls him back. The Japanese leader studies the Mexican closely, frostbite on his face and hands, the telltale signs of altitude sickness, bluish lips, shallow breathing, exhaustion, dehydration, a textbook case of someone who has lingered far too long above 8,000 meters. "Listen carefully," Cato says, his tone grave. "We're continuing to the summit. We have no choice. We can only descend tomorrow morning. Hold on until then." The words land like a sentence, but David doesn't argue, doesn't beg, doesn't curse them. He simply nods. A climber's nod. On Everest, the rules are different, brutal but fair. "I understand," he whispers hoarsely. "Good luck on the summit." That strikes the Japanese harder than any plea would have. A dying man wishing them luck, a mountaineer to the very end. Cato feels his chest tighten. He digs into his pack, pulls out everything he can spare without endangering the team. A full thermos of tea, 1.5 liters, a bag of food, energy bars, dried meat, chocolate, a hand warmer, spare gloves. "This is all we can give," he says, placing the supplies beside David. "We'll come for you tomorrow on the way down. Hold on. You must hold on." "Thank you." David tries to smile, though his lips are cracked with frost. "You're good people." Cato shoulders his pack again. His team is ready to move. Every minute of delay could cost them the summit. And yet, he lingers. His gaze fixes on the Mexican in the red scarf, sitting in the rocky niche. "What's your name?" he he asks suddenly. David Lama González. I'm Yasuo Kato. We'll see each other tomorrow, David. See you tomorrow, Yasuo. The Japanese expedition continues upward, 6 figures fading slowly into the morning mist. The sound of their steps disappears. David is alone again, in his stone hollow, with a thermos of tea, a bag of food, and the faint hope of surviving until tomorrow. He pours himself more tea, eats half an energy bar. A flicker of strength returns, even a sliver of hope. Maybe he really can last until tomorrow. Maybe the Japanese will keep their promise. Hours pass. The sun climbs higher, but brings no warmth. At 8,000 meters it shines, but it does not heat. David rations his supplies. 1 sip of tea every hour, a small piece of chocolate at a time. At 2 in the afternoon, he hears distant shouts of joy. The Japanese have reached the summit. Kato has fulfilled his dream, and David, even in his state, feels genuine happiness for them. Climbers should celebrate each other's victories, no matter the circumstances. Evening falls, the temperature drops to -50. The tea in the thermos cools, turns lukewarm, then cold, then begins to freeze. David wraps himself in the emergency blanket Kato gave him, but the cold seeps through everything. Night. The stars blaze like precious stones, beautiful, merciless. David drifts in and out of shallow sleep, but sleep at this altitude is a gamble. The body may not wake again. By morning, he no longer moves. He sits as he had the day before, back against the rock, legs stretched, hands resting on his knees. The red scarf still bright against the gray stone. The Japanese descend from the summit at 10 the next morning. Kato is the first to approach the familiar niche. He peers in, dread already in his chest. David is seated calmly, as if meditating, eyes closed, face at peace. The thermos beside him is empty, the bag of food barely touched. He did not die of hunger, he died of cold, of exhaustion. Kato removes his cap and bows his head. The team gathers around, paying their respects in silence. On Everest, death is common. But this one feels different. They could have saved him. "Forgive us, David," Kato whispers. One of the climbers suggests bringing the body down. Kato shakes his head. It is technically impossible. And besides, the Mexican looks almost serene in his rocky niche, as if he had found his final rest among the mountains he loved. The Japanese leave. David Lama González remains on Everest forever. Within days, other climbers discover him, and he becomes the Red Scarf, a landmark for those climbing toward the roof of the world. A week later, a British expedition passes the niche. Leader David Breeshears notes the body's coordinates in his notebook. Deceased climber at 8,430, red scarf on the neck, presumed Mexican. A month later, a German team photographs the niche, marking it on their map. Landmark number 7, body in red clothing. By then, no one thinks of him as David Lama González from Guadalajara. He is simply the Red Scarf. The seasons passed. Every spring and autumn, expeditions from all over the world moved along the ridge. Americans, Europeans, Asians, all of them saw the same thing. The man in the red scarf, seated among the rocks. Amazingly, his body hardly changed. At 8,000 meters, nature keeps its own morgue. No bacteria, no insects, no decay. David looked as if he had fallen asleep only yesterday. The red scarf never faded, never tore. Synthetic fabric resisted ultraviolet light and the cold better than human flesh. It remained a bright flash of color on the gray slope, a beacon for those climbing toward the summit. Climbers reacted to him in different ways. Some simply passed by. Everest holds many bodies, and you cannot dwell on them all. Others paused for a moment, thinking about the fragility of life in the mountains. A few left small offerings beside the niche, an energy bar, a prayer flag, a photograph of loved ones. Not out of superstition, but out of respect. The red scarf became an unofficial memorial to all who had perished on Everest. For 10 years he sat there in his rocky hollow, a silent witness to human ambition and tragedy. Everyone who climbed the northeast ridge met his gaze and understood. This is the price of the dream of the summit. Over that decade, 2 opposing views formed around the red scarf. The mountaineering community split into camps. The first called him a symbol of responsibility. "Look at him and remember," said Everest veterans. "Every decision in the mountains has consequences. Every mistake can cost you your life." To them, the red scarf was a lesson, a stark reminder that the mountain forgives no carelessness. Poor equipment, weak preparation, overconfidence, all of it had led the Mexican into that niche. He took the risk and he lost, the pragmatists argued. The expedition was underfunded, the team inexperienced, the gear outdated. The tragedy was inevitable. For them, the red scarf was a warning. If you want Everest, prepare seriously. Study the route, buy the best gear, train for years. Otherwise, you'll end like the Mexican in the red scarf. But there was another view, a radically different one. He could have been saved, the others insisted. The Japanese found him alive. They had 6 men, ropes, equipment. They could have brought him down. For this camp, the red scarf became a symbol of Everest's cruelty. Not the cruelty of nature, but of humans. Proof that in the chase for the summit, people can lose their humanity. Picture it, they said. A dying man asks for help, and you walk past because you have other plans. That isn't mountaineering. That's heartlessness. Supporters of the Japanese gave technical arguments. Evacuating someone from 8,400 meters requires specialized gear. Stretchers, extra oxygen, trained porters. The expedition had none of it. They all would have died, the defenders insisted. David was already doomed. 2 days in the death zone without oxygen is a death sentence. Why sacrifice 6 lives for 1? The critics countered with emotion. But what if it had been their teammate, their brother? Would they have walked past then? The debate spread far beyond the climbing community. Philosophers argued about the ethics of extreme sports. Psychologists studied human behavior under stress. Journalists wrote about the price of ambition. The red scarf became more than a body on Everest's slope. He turned into a mirror, reflecting back whatever you carried inside. Pragmatist or idealist, egoist or altruist. Some climbers even altered their routes just to avoid passing the niche. They couldn't bear the silent reproach. Others, by contrast, went to the red scarf deliberately, as if to a shrine, to pray, to reflect on why they climbed at all. And year after year, he sat in his rocky hollow, an unmoving judge of human choices, a silent witness to just how far people are willing to go for their dreams. Everyone who hears the story of the red scarf asks the same question. Why wasn't his body brought down? Why was he left sitting in that rocky hollow like a scarecrow? The answer is brutal but simple. Bringing a body down from 8,000 meters is almost impossible. Think about the scale of it. A body weighs 70 to 80 kilos. Add winter clothing, boots, climbing gear, another 20. That's 100 kilos that would need to be hauled down 4 vertical kilometers through the most dangerous terrain on Earth. In the death zone, a living climber can barely drag themselves along. Now, imagine carrying an extra 100 kilos, down ice walls, across crevasses, in thin air, and 40 below cold. How many people would it take? At least a dozen elite climbers. They'd need to rotate constantly, 4 carrying, 8 securing, and resting. Without rotation, the rescuers would collapse themselves. Each climber would need their own supply of oxygen for 10 to 12 hours, plus extra bottles for the body, just in case there's still a spark of life. That's 40 bottles total, $300 apiece, $12,000 for oxygen alone. Then the gear, reinforced stretchers, heavy-duty straps, extra ropes, all of it dragged up to 8,000 meters, then dragged back down along with the body. And the hardest part, finding people willing to do it. 12 climbers risking their own lives to recover the dead, working at their absolute limit in the most dangerous place on the planet. For what? For principle? For money? If it's for money, how much? Each rescuer would expect at least $10,000. That's a standard rate for work in the death zone. $120,000 in pay alone. Add the cost of an entire expedition. Permits, logistics, base camp, food, communications. Another $50,000 minimum. Altogether, $200,000 for a single body recovery. And that's assuming everything goes smoothly. What if the weather turns? What if someone is injured during the descent? One recovery could trigger a chain of new tragedies. That's why Everest follows an unspoken rule. The dead are left where they fall. Harsh, but the only logic that makes sense. There are exceptions, but they are rare. In 2007, the family of an American climber paid $300,000 to recover his body. The operation lasted a week and involved 18 people. 2 rescuers suffered severe frostbite. In 2010, Nepali authorities attempted to clear bodies from the main routes. They managed to remove 11 in a single season. The cost, $500,000. One rescuer had to be airlifted to a hospital with pulmonary edema. After that, the program was abandoned. Too expensive, too dangerous. The red scarf remained in his niche. Like hundreds of others who never left the slopes of Everest, the mountain had become their final resting place, the highest graveyard on Earth. Spring 1995. A new climbing season begins on Everest. Teams from all over the world prepare for their summit attempts. Many plan to take the northeast route, the very path where the red scarf had sat for 10 years. The first group to pass the familiar hollow comes in early May, a British expedition led by Alan Hinckeys. Experienced climbers who had seen the red scarf on previous climbs, Hinckeys approaches the niche and freezes, empty. Just a few stones, a faint mark in the snow where the body once rested, and nothing more. The red scarf is gone. "Where is he?" one of the Brits asks. "No idea," Hinks replies. "He was here last year, same as always." They search the area. Could an avalanche have shifted the body? No sign of one? Could the wind have blown it away? Unlikely. The body weighed nearly 100 kilos and the niche was sheltered. A week later, an American team passes by. The same question. "Where is the red scarf?" Guide Scott Fisher shakes his head. After 15 years of climbing here, he had grown used to the landmark. Now, it was gone. The news spreads quickly through base camps. The red scarf has vanished. Where? How? Who removed him? The climbing community is in uproar. The first theory, volunteers. Perhaps some climber decided to remove the body out of compassion. Maybe the family had finally raised the money for recovery, or a group of enthusiasts had secretly organized the operation themselves. But that theory collapses almost immediately. A body recovery from 8,400 meters is one of the most complex operations imaginable. It requires weeks of preparation, dozens of people, and enormous sums of money. Something like that could never happen in secret. What makes it stranger is that no one saw any recovery teams on the Northeast Ridge, and the mountaineering world is small. Everyone knows everyone. Rumors spread instantly. The second theory is more intriguing. An official intervention. Maybe the authorities decided to remove the body as an unwanted symbol. The red scarf had become too well known. He spoiled the image of Everest as a safe tourist route. This version sounds plausible. Authorities had the resources for such an operation. Military helicopters, specialized units, secrecy. They could have carried it out at night, quietly, without drawing attention. But here too lies the problem. Officials never commented on the disappearance of the red scarf. No confirmations, no denials. Journalists pushed for answers. Silence. The third theory is the most mysterious. What if the body vanished on its own? A glacier shifting, a hidden crevasse opening, swallowing the red scarf into the mountain's depths. On Everest, anything is possible. The mountain lives and breathes, always changing. Geologists shake their heads. Yes, glaciers move, but slowly. Centimeters per year. In 10 years, the body might have shifted a meter, no more. The fourth theory surfaced later, after the uproar died down. What if the red scarf had never disappeared at all? What if climbers simply mistook the spot? Niches in the rocks look alike. It's easy to confuse them, but that too crumbles under scrutiny. Too many had seen the red scarf in that exact place. Too many photos tied to precise landmarks. And so, the mystery remained. The red scarf vanished as suddenly as he had once appeared. For 10 years, he was part of Everest. Then, without a trace, he was gone. When the news of David's death reached Guadalajara, his family faced not only grief, but financial ruin. Remember the sacrifices he had made for his dream? The debts did not disappear. $25,000, an astronomical sum for a middle-class Mexican family in the 1980s. David had promised his parents, "I'll come back a hero, pay everything off, buy you a new house." Instead, they received a telegram announcing his death on Everest. The house David mortgaged had to be repaid to the bank. The deadlines didn't vanish with him. His parents begged the lender for mercy. "Our son is dead. Please grant us a delay." The banker was merciless. A contract is a contract. Pay or leave. The family simply didn't have the money. His father, an engineer at a local factory, earned $300 a month. To cover the debt, He would have needed to work 7 years without spending a cent on food or housing. Impossible. David's mother, Consuelo González, tried to find extra work. She cleaned offices at night, washed laundry for neighbors, sewed at home. Every peso counted, but it was nowhere near enough. Relatives who had lent David money began to demand it back. His uncle, his cousin, even the neighbors wanted repayment. The family became outcasts in their own neighborhood. People crossed the street to avoid them, unwilling to meet their eyes. 6 months after David's death, the bank began foreclosure on the house. His parents packed their lives into cardboard boxes. 40 years in one place, gone because of their son's dream of distant mountains. They moved in with David's younger brother, Carlos. He lived in a one-room apartment on the outskirts of the city with his wife and 2 children. Now 6 people crowded into 20 square meters. David's father, Rafael González, fell into depression. He started drinking, lost his factory job. He spent his days at the window, staring at the distant hills, cursing the day he agreed to mortgage the house for his son's impossible dream. His mother held out longer, but eventually broke. She stopped leaving the apartment, stopped eating. Doctors spoke of nervous exhaustion. Treatment cost money the family didn't have. Carlos tried to support his parents, but his salary barely fed his own family. He worked as a mechanic in an auto shop, earning $200 a month. Feeding 6 people on that was impossible. Months passed. The family unraveled. Carlos's wife grew resentful. When would this end? The children went hungry. Her in-laws had become shadows. She threatened to leave and take the kids with her. A year after the tragedy, Carlos made a terrible decision. He sold the only thing they had left, his father's old car. It brought $1,500. With that, he bought tickets to send his parents to live with distant relatives in the countryside. "It will be better there," he told them. "Aunt Maria will give you a roof. I'll send money when I can." And so David's parents left Guadalajara forever, to a village with no electricity, no running water, a place where the old lived out their days in poverty and obscurity. The cost of their son's dream had proven too high, not just for him, but for them as well. Rafael González died 3 years later, of cirrhosis of the liver. Consuelo lived another 7 years, but never smiled again. David's name was never spoken in the house. It hurt too much. This is the other side of heroic tales of conquest. Behind every summit are not just ambition and glory, but real people who pay the price for someone else's dream. But let's be honest. Could it really have gone any other way? Knowing the ending now, it's easy to sit back and judge. But what would you have done in the shoes of 28-year-old David? Picture it. Your entire life devoted to a single dream. 8 years of preparation, dozens of climbs, studying every route on Everest. And suddenly, the chance. The one chance to join a national expedition. Wait a few more years, people would say. But what if that chance never came again? David understood that. Deep down, he knew. It was now or never. Miss the moment, and the dream would die. At 30, he'd be expected to settle down, buy a house, raise kids, live an ordinary life. And Everest would remain just a dot on a distant map. Be financially responsible, we say from the comfort of the 21st century. Don't go into debt. Don't mortgage the house. Don't risk your family's well-being for a whim. Sensible, rational advice. But dreams don't follow financial logic. The pull of the mountains, the hunger for achievement, the need to prove something to yourself and the world. All of it burns brighter than interest rates. If it didn't, no one would ever climb an 8,000er. Too expensive, too dangerous, too irrational. And what does it really mean to call someone selfish? To think only of yourself, forgetting your parents and family obligations? But David wasn't only thinking of himself. He wanted to come back a hero, to put Mexico on the map, to show the world that Mexicans too could reach the highest summits. Maybe he should have let it go, accepted that not every dream comes true, married Maria, raised children, saved for retirement, lived an ordinary, safe, predictable life. But then the world would have lost one of the most haunting stories in mountaineering. The story of a young engineer from a tropical country who set his sights on the roof of the world and almost made it. He reached the summit. He lived his dream, if only for a moment. Yes, the cost was unbearable. Yes, his family paid the price for his ambition. Yes, the financial collapse was inevitable. But can we really measure dreams only in dollars and risks? Every day, millions of people make the rational choice. They give up on dreams for stability. They choose safety over adventure, and they're right to do so, because most dreamers crash and burn. But sometimes, someone goes all the way, puts everything on the line for a single goal, risks it all for a fleeting moment of triumph. And even if the story ends in tragedy, it inspires others. It shows that limits exist only to be broken. David's story isn't just about mountains and ambition. It's a reminder that behind every dream are real people facing real consequences. His parents kept paying that loan for 5 years after his death. Maria never married. She told her friends that after a man who chose Everest over her, everyone else seemed too ordinary. In climbing circles, the legacy of the red scarf is still debated. Some see him as a cautionary tale, proof of what not to do, of how selfish it is to sacrifice your loved ones for personal glory. Others see him as a hero, someone who showed the world that Mexicans too were capable of great feats. But maybe the most important thing about his story are the questions it leaves behind. David Lama González could have lived an ordinary, comfortable life, died in his bed, surrounded by grandchildren, leaving behind a bank account and an insurance policy. Instead, he went into history as the red scarf, a symbol of the human hunger for the impossible. Was he right? That's for each of us to decide. But his story forces us to think about the cost of chasing dreams, and whether a safe life is worth more than a dangerous one. What matters more, the dream or life itself? If this story touched you, leave a like and tell us in the comments. If your son, brother, or husband chose to take a risk like this, would you stand by his decision?